Hey ANPers, this is Dr. Jones checking in. This is video lecture 3 or 4 for AMP 1 lecture test 5, Del Mar College with Dr. Jones. We're going to be talking about the types of ion channels. So I have a picture here of the chart on the note set, top of page 13. And let's go across. So we're going to talk about the leak channels. We've talked about leak channels before. And the stimulus to open on a leak channel, and I'm typing here, one second, is that they are always open. And the stimulus to close for a leak channel is that they are always open. The location on the leak channels are everywhere. And they're responsible for your resting potential, the resting membrane potential. Typing, one second, T-E-N-T, potential, done. Resting potential, perfect. So those are the leak channels, they're always open. And as a review, when I say channels, I'm talking about proteins that are embedded in the cell membrane. So chemically gated channels, the stimulus to open is the presence of the chemical. Presence of chemical. And the stimulus to close is the absence of that chemical. Of chemical. Okay, and the location on these, technically there's chemically gated all over, but the parts we care about are going to be the somas and dendrites. Somas and dendrites, done. Oh, good. And the chemically gated ion channels, as you may know, are responsible for your graded potentials. Graded potential. The voltage-gated ion channels, the stimulus to open here is going to be threshold. And threshold is a measure of voltage, which is, for our purposes, negative 60. I'm typing. I don't know if you can see the typing or not, but I'm typing. Negative 60 millivolts. So resting potential is negative 70 millivolts. And threshold voltage is negative 60 millivolts, so a 10 millivolt difference. Now the stimulus to close for the voltage gated ion channels is peak voltage. Peak voltage is plus 30 millivolts. So, and this will be specific to the voltage-gated sodium ion channels. The voltage-gated potassium ion channels will actually open at peak voltage. But the voltage-gated sodium ion channels open at threshold, which is negative 60 millivolts, and they close at peak, which is plus 30 millivolts. And the location of voltage-gated ion channels are going to be the excitable membranes. So specifically, the axons, the dendrites, and the synaptic knobs. The synaptic knobs will actually have voltage-gated calcium ion channels, which will regulate the release of the neurotransmitter. And so the voltage-gated ion channels are responsible for your action potential. Action potential. All right. Mechanically gated ion channels are completely different. The stimulus to open here is touch. The stimulus to close is the absence of touch. Typing, absence of touch. And the location, these are found in sensory receptors. TORS, sensory receptors. Not return, done. Done, there we go. And these are responsible for sensation. And there's a picture of the sensory receptors, all of these receptors in your book. On page 1210, the types of gated ion channels, page 406 if you're in the purple version of the Martini book. The chemically gated ion channels, the picture has the acetylcholine binding to it, opens the channel, and that increases the permeability of the membrane to that ion. The voltage-gated sodium ion channels, and this is an important bit, add text, have an activation gate. An activation gate and an inactivation gate. Not enter, done. Oops, wrong spot. There we go. Inactivation gate. And this becomes very important as we go through the physiology. So I did also want to draw with you the picture at the bottom of the notes at page 13, where it says draw figure 1213, page 406, and that must be the older version. On the new version, it's figure 1212 on page 409, showing that graded potentials can be depolarizing or hyperpolarizing. So we're going to start on the side at negative 70 millivolts. And then above that will be less negative, negative 60 millivolts. So negative 60 millivolts is less negative than negative 70 millivolts. It'd be like if you owe 60 bucks on your Kohl's card instead of 70 bucks, you're in less debt. No, you're still in debt, you're still negative, but you're in less debt than if you owe 70 bucks. Whereas if you owe 80 bucks, you're in even more debt. So for this picture, we're going to go across. Okay, so here where we start to go up is where the stimulus is applied. And as this moves, and this stimulus here will be opening a sodium ion channel. So as positive sodium ions rush into the negative cell, the inside of the cell gets less negative. Just like as you start to pay off your Kohl's card, it gets less negative. And so that is depolarization. P-O, it's an O-L, A-R-I-Z-A-T-I-O-N. Depolarization is where it gets less negative. So polarized means there's two different poles, like north and south on a magnet or the earth. And depolarization is when you decrease the distance between those poles. So we're getting less negative, we're getting closer to zero. So that's depolarization. Then when the chemical stimulus is removed, it goes back down to 0. And this is called repolarization. Repolarization is when it goes back to being as negative as it was before. Let's say instead of binding to a sodium ion channel, oh, that was right, sodium ion channel. In this case, let's bind to a potassium ion channel. So when you open, sorry, let's fix that. There you go, K plus, a potassium ion channel. When you open a potassium ion channel, the potassium, the positive ions rush out of the cell. And since the cell is already negative on the inside, when it loses these positive ions, it becomes more negative. So this is called, oh, I'm feeling hot pink. Oh yeah, hot pink. This is called hyperpolarization. Oh, that wasn't very bright. Let's try again. Here we go. Hyperpolarization. It still weirds me out that TI says shh, shun. I know, hyperpolarization. So hyperpolarization is where it gets even more negative because you're losing positive ions. And then as it returns to resting, it does not get a fancy term. When we depolarized and returned to resting, we got a fancy term. We got repolarization. When we got more negative than normal, we got hyperpolarization. And now that we're going back to normal, we're at returns to resting potential, which is less fun. Returns to resting potential. Okay, I do want to make a note about the difference between repolarization and hyperpolarization. Repolarization is when it's gone from normal to depolarized and it is now going back to normal. So repolarization, it's getting more negative inside the cell, but it's getting more negative going towards normal. Hyperpolarization is also getting more negative inside the cell, but getting more negative than normal. So subtle but distinct difference there. And that is everything I have on that picture on page 13. So this has been video lecture 3, 4 for AMP1 lecture test 5. Thanks as always for tuning in. The education must go on. Dr. J out.